What's up, guys? Back and rolling. I'm getting ready to work on another project here. So I picked up a new toy for the garage. So let's have a look. There you have it. It's a Pro tabletop from Certiflat at weldtables.com. And so I got that, and I've got the stand for it. So that's going to be the next project. And we're going to be starting on that right now. All right, so not sure about the fab block, but for the Pro top, this is how it comes. Roughly 75 pounds. It's bolted down to 2x4s, so pretty well protected. There's no damage to it. The inner structure there that you see crisscrossing, those are all loose, but they're set in place. And so I'll take those out and lay the tabletop down flat on my weld table here. And we'll start going through the process of making sure that it's going to be nice and flat before welding. So let's get started. All right, guys, so got the table up on my Hobart foldable welding table, and I'll show you here in a minute, but it's up on two 2x4s, kind of elevated. What I'm going to get into is a little more in depth about how to actually weld this table together and try to get as flat as possible. And that involves checking to make sure those ribs are straight. And then all the clamps we're going to use. Basically, I might use some C-clamps, but I've got a lot of U-bolts that I picked up from Lowe's and Home Depot. You're looking for U-bolt sizes from 2 inches from center to center of the U-bolt, or 2 3/4 inches from center to center of the U-bolt, and that should work just fine for what you're doing. Other than that, just hand tools and then just put the table together. So, all right, let's get into how we're gonna make sure this table is gonna end up being straight. Okay, so as you can see, tools, I've got assortment of clamps of different lengths. So I went to different stores and they had 2 different things, obviously. So these are, because these guys, the smooth part's a little long, so it's just a spacer to take up the space. These guys are the exact ones. I got 13 of those, and then a bunch of these. And then to just regular hand tools is another oddball one that I got. Whatever works. They all do the same thing, right? Marking tool, you're gonna need one of those. A feeler gauge. You need a pen light or some kind of light that you can get in the corner between the top and the ribs to make sure it's flat. You're gonna want gloves. I use acetone. If you're gonna do that, make sure you use latex gloves. You don't want that stuff getting in your system. The table comes filthy, so you got to clean the table up. You can MIG it or you can TIG it. Today I'm going to TIG it. I picked up one of these buttons for 4T, so I'm gonna practice using that, playing around. And then you can use whatever means to ratchet it down. Hand tools work fine. Power tools work fine as well. You just got to make sure you ratchet it down. And then yeah. So other than that, let's get into how to make sure the tabletop's going to be flat. Okay, cool. So off camera, it's a little hard to get the angle. So first things first, let's make sure that the crown is pointed in the right direction. So before we get started, you want the crown down. You want a gap between your straight edge to be in the center. So when you put the ribs on, they will touch flush on the ends, and then they'll pull the table into the rib, and that's what makes it flat, or as flat as you can get it. So whatever means necessary, I got my straight edge here. Let me show you. I already know I have the crown down, right? So kind of hard to see the camera angle, but I'll shine a light. So you can see it right there. And then I'll come over to the end and it starts to dim out a little bit. Turn this. And then as I get over to the end here, you can't see anything. So what you want to do is you want to do that very thing I just did. You don't need a light, and you can see plenty. There's about a little over, more like a 3/8 inch gap right there, right? And then you want to do it there. You want to do it there, just to make sure there's no like weird twist in the table. And then you do a diagonal, and it's pretty much the same all the way through. So I know that my table is set right to put these ribs on and make sure that that it's going to suck the center up. You don't want to suck the outer edges in. It's not how it's meant to be put together. Okay, with that said, I'm going to get this guy here. So another thing you want to do is you want to make sure that your ribs are straight. Now, this might be hard to do with this level. Let's see here. Got another one. Let's try it with this one. This other level's got a V groove in it, and I need it to be flat. All right. So as best we can here, you should be able to see that. So as I said, I've already gone through and checked all this. So this rib here, I've marked it. I only had two, one long one and one short one that were like this. Now, they can be twisted or bent this way or that. It doesn't matter. You just bring it back over, get it on the table. Some of them were like that, most of them weren't. It's not a big deal. What is a big deal is making sure that it's not really bad this direction. So as I put it on the straight edge, I've noticed that I got one end down there is touching, the center's touching, but I have about 3/32 of an inch, maybe a little more than that, sticking up on the end over here. So what is that telling me? That this rib is not 100% flat. Now what I can do is I can hold that end down there while this end's touching, and I can literally push this down and make it flat. So it just worked a little bit during the cutting process. Like I said before, I've already checked everything. I have assembled the table before and found it to be this end here is going to most likely be the back on the wall. This had a little bit of, I was out of flat by maybe 0.024 split between the two ends, which is not bad. And I'm accepting that. Weldtables.com, if you call them, they will work with you quite a bit, and we'll get more into that later. But anyway, so I can sit here and I can rock this. I don't know if you can hear that or not, but I can rock that up and down. Not a big deal. I've accepted that. And then there's another one, the shorter rib. It's not as bad as this one. So what I did is, okay, cool, I know where I'm going to place it on here. You can move it around on all the different slots here, back and forth, and clamp the table down. It's very time consuming, but you only get one shot at this, and then find where the table's the most flat. So I recommend that the front part, where you're going to mostly be working most of the time, be the flattest, and then the part that goes maybe against the wall, if you're going to work that way, that would be where the not so flat area would be. Or if you're going to have this be in the middle of the room, just know what side's going to be the flattest at all times. Mark it maybe, however you want to do it. So anyway, that's how I checked that out. And then other than that, let's get the table assembled. All right guys, so like I said before, table's up on some 2x4s, makes it easier to get underneath and tighten these clamps down. Remember, crown down. So when you put the ribs on, you want the edges should be touching, and then you should have a nice gap in the center. Another note, like I said before, I had already assembled this to get it where everything I wanted, and I marked it. So all the ribs were marked on the table so I could put it back where they were originally. And so when you put this together, remember it's tab and slot, so it should just fall together. If it doesn't, you might have to use a little bit of hammer on it and get it tapped into place. If you have to use excessive force to get something in place, you're wrong, or there's something wrong with the table. The way they ship it is when they verify that everything fits, so it should go together. There might be a burr on something. I do know that some of the guys like to come through with a file and file down the edges to make sure that any of those small burrs aren't there, but I've felt everything feels real smooth, especially when I was cleaning them. So, all right, so remember, short ribs first, and then long ribs go on after. Okay, so as you can see, all the ribs are in place. So I want to show you these gaps. See underneath there? nice big gap. And if I come down to the end, see how it gets shallower, 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 and then there's hardly anything, pretty much nothing there, right? So that is correct. So you want the crown down. I can't stress that enough. So what's next is when you clamp this together, you want to work from the center out. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'll end up clamping here first, right in the center, right here in the center, and then I'll clamp here, 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 and here, and then I'll just continue to work my way out, and then when I get that middle square rectangle here area done, then I'll come to either side, doesn't matter, and I'll do here, 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 and then do there, and then the opposite. So every single cross section is going to have a clamp. Now you don't have to do that. You could just do one section at a time, but I found that doing the whole thing is best, because even when you have all of these clamped down, you could put a light on the other side of here, and we have a clamp here and a clamp here, and you'll still see light underneath. So you got to put clamps inside here, and that'll really suck that table nice and flat, which I have not done yet. So that might actually work out in my favor to get the rest of the table right where I need it to be. Other than that, take a look at this. See how this is sticking up here? That is supposed to be flush with this guy. So see how this guy is right here? That's what they're all supposed to look like. That's how you know everything's sitting right. So, all right, so let's get into clamping this thing down. All right, so while I'm clamping it down, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put clamps all through the center section here, and that'll hold the entire table together. And then I'm going to flip it over. It just makes it a lot easier to use a power tool instead of trying to work underneath and fighting gravity and nuts, trying to get these clamps on. And so I'm gonna go ahead and do that now. So yeah, as I said, just the center is what I'm gonna start with. The table, I was wrong earlier, is like 120 pounds all said and done. So if you can't do this yourself, wait for someone to help you flip it over. Oh, and then another thing, when I put it together, this guy comes in through the top here, and then I put the plate on the flat side of the table. I've seen some guys put these things together online where they do it the other way, and then they're not getting enough pressure. This is starting to bend down. So yeah, you want to put it down while the table's upside down like this. All right guys, so with this, I'm going to show you, this is the center clamp, the first one that I put on. I want to show you what it does. So you can see the nice big gap underneath here, right? So this is how great these things work. You're getting it nice and snug. You don't have to crank it down too tight. It's just gotta make it flat where this corner section there is touching. And as you can see, I mean, it really closed that up. If I get my light here, shouldn't see too much light underneath. Yeah, you can't see anything, but as I work my way out, you can start to see that light right there, right? But right there where it was the clamp is nice and tight all the way around there. And then looking at other parts of the table, like this guy here, also, I mean, that had the same size gap and it is almost closed up now. So one clamp did all that, right? And this guy was snug tight before I started, so you could see that's how much it closed it up. So yeah, so just take your time with it and get the clamping done. So what I'm gonna do now is tighten all these up here and all the way down there, and then I'm gonna rotate the table over and then get all the rest of the clamps on, and then we'll get into measuring to make sure the table is where we want it to be. All right guys, so as you can see, everything's put in place. The ones that are tight are the center ones here. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna tighten these four, and these four, and then I'll work my way out on the ends, and that should yield the same result that I had before. All right guys, so I got the table flipped over here. It is much flatter than it was last time, which is great. The further end, which is I'm going to have be the front of the table for where it's going, is completely flat. And then as I move the straight edge back, there starts to get a crown in the center. So it's not as flat, but it's within the limits. And then as I bring it closer, out here is where it's the most not flat. And then doing crosses, I noticed that, you know, right around in the center is where the crown starts. So it, even though we had it upside down and we pulled it in, it's still just a slight bump there, but it's within spec. So that front half of the table is 100% good to go, right? So what I'm gonna show you is how to measure this accurately. So what I got, as you can see, I got my feeler gauge kit here, and I took it apart. And then if you look underneath here, you can see the light. And then I ended up getting these two guys here to fit perfectly underneath there without moving the straight edge. And that's 31 thousandths and 27 thousandths stacked on each other. And then I just put that underneath, and it just dragged just a little bit. So, all right, so what does that mean? Well, weldtables.com is claiming that the Certiflat table, when it's all put together, will be plus or minus 0.015 inches, right? So I added those two together and I got 0.058. So to be fair, I'm gonna go ahead and divide that by 2, and that'll kind of put the straight edge with the same distance on the ends off the table. So divide that by 2, and I get 0.029, right? So if I subtract 0.015 from that, I mean, I am off almost double what they're claiming, right? So first side, so that if I subtracted that, I get 0.014, a thicker or taller gap than what they're claiming I'll have. I am okay with that. Now keep in mind, this is a 3/16 inch thick table top, and they're not perfect when you get them. You could do things, you can shim, you can see some guys online, they take a hammer to it, right? But you know, for the type of work that I'm gonna be doing, even if it needed to be flat, I know it'll still be flat because I'm gonna be working on the other side of the table, and this side of the table is gonna be holding all the clamps anyway. So I am not stressed out about that whatsoever. There's other options too, especially call weldtables.com. I've been working with a guy named Corey there. He's been fantastic. We'll get more into that later, but they are definitely there to help you. And you know, if you have any problems, I mean, no questions asked. They'll send you extra parts to get this thing flat. So, but I am very much so happy with that result. That is not something that I'm gonna be worried about. So the next thing is now is to flip the table back over again and get going on this. So the next thing we get into is welding it and checking the gaps with light. All right. Let's do it. All right guys, so getting set up here. I just wanted to show you this. Table's over, obviously. Got my TIG set up and everything. You need a light, and it's hard to see. Hopefully you can see it in this camera, but you see how I have light coming through those holes there? Well, that's expected, right? But what's not expected is have light come in underneath between the flat part of the table and the rib. So as I pass this underneath here and I slide it, hard to see. Looking good there. It's pretty good there, right? So a little bit here, a little bit here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put a clamp on this side and on this side and suck that down. See if I can't find it right there. So see how you can just see that light moving? That's what you're looking for, and that's what you're looking to close up. So you put a clamp there, tighten it down, and then check that spot again. So what's interesting is I have no gap over here, but I have a gap here. And this is the front side, so I'm going to suck this down and it should be good. I'm expecting to have something similar, a little bit there, not so much there. So yeah, so we'll see. Tighten these gaps up might flatten the table out even more. So this is the front side that was already pretty flat, so we'll go ahead and bring that in, and then I'll run a straight edge underneath and check it out. And then from there we'll get to welding. As you can see, I tacked on 2 sides of the center of each web here, each rib. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna finish the square out. I gotta move a clamp here and then do the same thing there, and then I'll come over here and do that. And then I'll move over here and do that, just kind of trying to keep it cool and all that, right? And then I'll come over here and finish that out. And then I'll come down here and I'll do this guy, I'll do that guy, I'll do that guy, I'll do that guy, and then I'll finish up over there. And then one thing with the ends, I'm gonna make sure that there's no light coming through here on the ends. If there is, go ahead and just get yourself a C-clamp or whatever and add a little reinforcement here. One last thing, after you're done doing the perimeter of everything, and there's clamps, the perimeter of everything, and you've clamped it down, there's no light underneath, you can come in and add a little corner weld on each one of these, kind of just lock it all into place there. So just remember, distribute the heat evenly, and take your time and have fun with it. Okay, so just got done tacking all the welds underneath. It took me about 2 hours to do. Just wanted to show you, so coming through you see the tacks all the way around. So each box has a set of 2 tacks on each wall. Once you get started and you get out of the center, the time it takes to do this picks up because you've already done one side on these boxes here and over there once you finish this section here. Make sure you get all the corners. Remember, there's tack welds. These mine are hair more than tack weld. I'm practicing TIGging right now, so I'm having fun with it. I did measure the table again, make sure it's flat. It's still flat, it hasn't shifted at all. So, but yeah, anyway, not too bad. I mean, it looks pretty good, right? Yeah. So, all right, cool. Let's get the table flipped over. Get the U-bolts off, and we'll do another measurement, make sure it's flat, and then we're gonna finish weld on top. Okay, so just got done measuring it and seeing how flat it is, and the back got a little bit tighter, meaning the gap between the top and the level got a little bit tighter, which is good. To me, it's perfect for what I needed to do. You can definitely mess around with it and work on getting the table to be perfectly flat. But I know that since this is going to be the front here and up to about right around here is flat. And so this area here is where most of my welding is going to be done anyway. And I'm not doing welding that requires I have a super flat top. Now, super flat's pretty relative. A lot of guys out there want it to be perfectly flat because they're doing machine work and precision welding and all that jazz. I'm building headers and exhaust parts and car parts and stuff that don't require a machining tool of any sort, so it doesn't have to be that accurate. If I wanted to, I could get another top that's even more flat and just either weld it or bolt it to this. and then it would be perfect, but for what I'm using this for, it's excellent. Anyway, all right, enough of that. So now I need to come in and I need to weld in here. So I can either weld these guys in all 4 spots, or I can weld down in there, get those 2 tied together, and then tie it into the tabletop. I think what I'm going to end up doing though is aiming for right there, and then just bring in some filler wire in there, or just some filler, and then tying this lip here and this lip to the rib underneath, and do that at all 4 spots, and then down in here as well. We'll see. I may, I'll give it a couple shots, see what I like. I may end up just doing these guys and then coming through and grinding them down. In fact, that seems way easier. I'm gonna do that. All right, anyway, let me get the top of the table cleaned up with some acetone, and then we'll get to welding. Okay, and welding is complete. A couple of things. One, I've got a lot of cleanup I gotta do. Using the TIG, there's not a lot, sitting on top. It kind of recesses down as you're welding, but I just wanna make sure that there's nothing poking up here. So I'll run a flapper disc on my angle grinder and just clean this up so it looks nice and it's completely, there's nothing protruding up. Another note, during the welding process, metal heats and expands and it can move. Well, I guess I should have played the lottery today. Unintentionally, welding all of these in the fashion that I did, pulled the table flatter. So it is very close to being within tolerance, and I'm very happy about this. So I'm flat here, here, and here now. I still have some of a gap of a rise somewhere in here that's causing the level to come up, but it's within spec. So this is a pretty flat table, so I'm very, very impressed with this. I'm happy it turned out the way it did. Here's some of my welds. You can see, yeah, I'll get better. But yeah, so I'm gonna clean this up, and then we're gonna get started on putting that leg kit down there on. All right, let's do it. All right, and minus the legs is everything else that comes in the kit. So you get your casters, you get your nuts and the plates they weld onto, and either the casters or the leveling feet for the table will screw into those. And then, so I got my table on the floor because it's about as heavy as I can lift right now, and with the legs on there, I'm afraid I can't get it down off that table by myself, so I'll just weld it on the floor. And then here are the posts. You got long, medium, and short. So yeah, it looks like 2 long, 2 short, and 4 mediums. So this should go together pretty well, pretty easy. I don't have long clamp bars, but I think you can use ratchet straps. So we'll just use a square and make sure that everything is square to the table itself. So, all right, let's get started. All right, so looking around here, I've got the posts laid out with their corners. If you look at them, they've got these slots in them, right? They're gonna go over here. And then these guys need to be pointed towards the inside of the table because the legs are going to connect to each other on these. And then up here is where the casters or the leveling feet are going to go. So lay it out. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through with a die grinder and a sanding disc and clean the metal off and just get it ready for welding. That way I can put it on and leave it on. All right, so got the legs in, how I want them. I just want to show you this. So I don't have the long clamps, the pole clamps. However, I'm using a ratchet strap. See how I got it? Going around right about the middle of each where the legs are connecting there. So without it, it's just on there, just hanging. Without it strapped down, you can see all that movement there, right? So if I come up here and I give this some love, tighten it up here. Now you can see it's rigid, right? And I just had a square against it. Let's have a look. You'll do this on every right angle. Touching there. And you can just see a little bit of light there at the bottom. It's very thin, maybe a 30-second. But I mean, I'm gonna move it around and try to get it, all those gaps to close up. And then I will tack weld it in place. You also wanna do is down here and make sure it's good. Again, it's just a little bit of play there. But that is not that important considering this one's going up on the casters and it should be good. But yeah, I'll tack it all with the TIG welder, and then once it's good to go, then I will finish weld it, and this thing will be done. All right, let's roll with it. Okay, so I just got done, as you saw, tacking the lower lateral legs together onto the vertical legs. The reason I'm moving on to this is because I want to go ahead and get the casters on, these guys over here, and then flip the table over and see what I think. If everything's good to go, then I'll finish welding it in that position. That'll also allow me to go over to the foot pedal, which will give me a little better control when I'm welding the thick table metal to the thin leg metal. So with that said, these guys, they come like this, and they want you to weld the nut on here, and then it can either go nut down to the floor when you install it, or nut inside. Depends how comfortable you are. Because if your weld breaks loose inside that tube after you weld this on, it'd be really hard to get anything off if you need to. So they suggest you do a nice long weld all the way around, or if you're gonna have the nut be inside the tube. Another thing is, a lot of guys like to run a bolt or have this running through to make sure it's centered, right? Don't do that, because when you weld it, this is gonna get distorted most likely, and you're gonna have to chase the threads. So what can happen is it'll gall the material, the threads on the piece that you want, for instance the caster, and then you won't be able to use it because it's going to be all jacked up. So just remember not to do that. So not too difficult, just line it up as center as best you can. There you go. And if it's off center just a little bit, you'll be able to clean this metal up and get whatever you need to get on there anyway. And then I'm going to use this clamp here once it's centered to hold it, and then I'll weld on the other side. And then as you can see, it's still off center just a hair. That looks pretty good right there. Oh, right there. That looks great. So I'll weld that, and I'll do all 4 of these. And I'm planning to have the nuts on the inside because these guys can extend a little bit. The video you see have spanner wrenches. Mine didn't come with a spanner wrench. This guy can turn, which will raise it up and down if you need to level your table out. Or you can put something underneath the wheel just to lock it in place. But all 4 casters lock, which is nice. And yeah, so all right, let's get to welding. Okay, so turned out good. Got 4 sides, so all the way around. I don't see any point in doing the entire thing. It's just heating it up more than it needs to be, but nice and centered. And then, so what I'm gonna do now is check to make sure that the threads are still good to go. And I'm gonna do that by, I can either run the bolts that came through with the kit, or I can use the cashers, or I can just go ahead and run a tap and see how well it goes through. As you can see, I got one down here right now ready to go. So let's check it out and see how the welding turned out. Getting ready to weld the feet on here. So this guy just drops in just like that, okay? And then what you need to think about, so if you're going to weld it in this fashion and not this fashion, this one you can, if you do that, you can run your bead along the top if you want to, but if you weld it in like that, don't weld up here because the caster plate needs to be able to sit flush against something. And if you do that, it'll be all cockeyed, right? So I recommend just running a bead here and here. Just tack this piece in. It doesn't really need to be in all that strong. Tacking it will hold it in just fine. Just a nice heavy tack, right? So I'm gonna go ahead and get that welded in. I'm gonna end up welding, tacking that in, like I said, down in here. All right, and there you have it. So each side of each tab that I could get at, got a tack weld on it, and that should be good enough to secure that foot in place. So I'm gonna go ahead and knock out the other three. Okay, I got all the feet in. So now I just need to, let's go ahead and screw the casters down in there, right? And then we can flip the table over. See how this fits. There we go. Just snug it, don't have to be extremely tight. So I'm going to go ahead and get all these done. I'm gonna lock them to help aid in getting the table over. And I'm gonna end up flipping it that way. So, all right, let's do it. All right, the weld table is in place. So a couple things. One, I wanted to get the top nice and level. And my garage floor has a slope to it. So I put a level on top. And then on this side, I had to extend the casters out, but they were loose. So I added a nut on this one and the one in the back, and tightened them down so they're locked in place so the table doesn't move around. Added a shelf for my welder to sit on, and then I welded a support beam across to help support the shelf. Other than that, very pleased with how this turned out, and looking forward to getting to welding on it. All right, guys, so thanks for following along with me on this one. I do want to give a shout out to weldtables.com, especially a gentleman there named Corey. As you can see, there's another table behind me. So this one we just built was not my first table. I built the other one. I had filmed it and everything. I built it exactly how it was supposed to be built, and but I didn't do all the additional measuring that I did, like I showed you guys on this one, to make sure that all the ribs were correct. The table was very, very not flat, meaning there was a 1/4 inch gap on one end. I could not pull it back together. So what I did is, I called them up, and I had ordered the table back in December, had to go away for work, and it's now May, and that's when I got to putting it together, and I called them after I realized it was so not flat, that they didn't ask a single question. They just sent me another one. So I want to give a shout out to them. They're awesome to work with. If you have any problems at all, they'll either send you what you need or will walk you through to help you out to make sure you're successful. So yeah, I highly recommend you guys go on their webpage at weldtables.com, or you can just Google like Certiflat. Go on there, watch their videos, look at what they have to offer. I do plan on getting some of their blocking / rack system to help put a 90-degree angle on something. And then, like I said, we're gonna make our own clamps for this for hopefully $3 to $5 max. So All right, thanks for following along. This was a fun time to learn how to do some TIG welding and all different angles and whatnot. And I got to use the push button and the foot pedal quite a bit, so totally worth it. Great project for those that are trying to learn to TIG or want to learn to MIG. You know, just take your time with it and you'll be successful.